So we are here on the Teflon Tales. With me today, I have Steve Brown. And Steve, you got to describe yourself, but you got to leave the punchline to me. But I'm going to introduce your book, and we're going to start from there. Just tell the audience about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm from a place called Texas. I have really great marketing agency called ROI Online, an internet marketing agency. And, we just help our clients get their act together online, help them get a strategy, and help them start to make that transition from traditional marketing into modern marketing.
And before we get to your book with that fantastic title, just for the listeners who are tuning for the first time, the Teflon Tales is really about how we can learn from Teflon. And what are the four things that Teflon can teach us? Like, how do you get fired up really quickly? How do you maintain your non stickiness? How do you remain flexible? And how do you remain balanced, right? So, those are four things. Now, let's start with, oh, we already have a place called Texas. Okay, so Sarabjit, welcome. Good,
Yay.
good. Yes. So somebody who knows what the place looks like. All right. So we're gonna. This is the punchline. Golden toilet. Talk about it, right? It's like I don't. I can't finish a book, but this is something I'm going to start and end, right? So talk about what it is that motivated you to do that, and looking back, how has this impacted your life, and more importantly, the lives of the readers.
Yeah. So, the title is The Golden Toilet. Stop flushing your marketing budget into your website and build a system that grows your business. And uh, every day I talk to entrepreneurs and they all come to me and they have the same expectation. I know I need to do something. I'm not exactly sure what I should ask for, but here's what I've been brainwashed into saying because I see it on social media all the time. I get phone calls all the time. Hey, we can get your website up to the top of the search phrase. Every day they get called this. So they come in and they go, okay, here's the three things I think I need. I think I need a new website. It needs to show up in a search somewhere. And I think I need to be posting on social media. And when someone is framed, and they came in and they wrote their own prescription. So imagine going to the doctor and you got his prescription pad and you just wrote the prescription and said, "Here, give it to me." Well, that's what's happening. But this is because these are entrepreneurs. And I believe the invisible heroes of our economy are the entrepreneurs. Did you know that 98% of the businesses in the United States have 20 or less employees?
Wow, I didn't know that stat. Wow.
So that means that the person running that company is crazy. That person has risked their future, their
Yeah.
family's future to start a business. And yet, what do? They employ almost half of the American workforce and they provide products and services that improve our lives. So I believe these are like the invisible heroes of our time. But anyway, I wrote this book to help reframe their
Mhm.
expectations of this investment that they need to do. Instead of think website, I want you to think of a system.
Mhm.
And so one day it just hit me. I was like, Ashwin, your website is just a toilet.
Yeah.
And they have the same reaction and they're going, what? But you know what you just did when you do that? You can
Yeah.
hear their little tires of their brain skidding on the pavement. It's like, what? A toilet?
Yeah.
Yes. You you wouldn't work in an office if it didn't have one. You wouldn't build a house and not have one. But
Yeah.
when people come over to your house, where do you hang out? You hang out in the kitchen, you hang out at the patio, around the pool, around the fireplace. And so it's the same thing with the website. It's one important piece of a bigger
Yeah.
system that you need to have the expectation that it helps support and grow the value of your business. So I thought of what's the most absurdly iconic image that's universal that represents a big fat waste of money. It's something that rock stars do, drug lords, Saudi kings. It's here. I wasted all this money, but it didn't improve the user experience and it didn't improve the functionality. And so the golden toilet. You can't say it without smiling. It stops your brain and it makes you lean in and figure it out. And that's just the essence of excellent marketing.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. So I'm going to go back probably 7, 8 years looking at your LinkedIn profile, right?
Hmm.
And here you are, and people looking at you and listening to you talk. Okay, so he's been doing this all his life. Not really, right? 6 years ago, you were in information security and data shredding.
Hmm.
And again, this is the pivot point, right? Which is how did you get into
Yeah.
marketing? Uh, and talk the people through the inner critic, the okay, what will the world say? Left my quote unquote stable job and venturing into this unknown online ROI. So how did that come about?
Yeah. So I was always ended up in a sales role for these companies. So I would be responsible for increasing market share for
Mhm.
these services. And back in the day, it was cold calling. So get out there and to meet your quota, you can get out and you knock on doors. So what does that mean? It means I'm going to show up at your business unannounced and try to figure out a way to get to sit down at your desk if you're the decision maker. And you've got to what? Take off your fire hat, take off your fire coat, put down the fire hose because you're busy fighting fires and
Yeah.
turn around and go, well, how can I help you make your quota, Steve? That's what my job was. And
Yeah.
so 1 out of 10 of those were even a potential close. It was a very tough job, but I enjoyed it and I was good at it. And so as I went through, I would I would take it the initiative and go and update the website. That's when the website was starting to be
Mhm.
like most businesses would have said, "Okay, I think we need a website." I mean, it was just basically a digital brochure back then.
Yeah.
But I would go and I would want to update it to make sure that it supported my sales process. But there happens to be a little form on there and where people would like click to email or fill out a form, and I would make sure that comes to me.
Mm.
Well, what I realized is out of the form submissions, 1 out of 3, 2 out of 3 would close. Well,
Wow.
why is that? It's because they're asking me to come talk to them about what we do. They're interested in what we do. So it's a very big contrast. And I did that on the second company that about that time, and I ended up in a similar position where I was able to take the initiative and go do it. And then after that, I ended up working for that web design firm that I took those two businesses to.
Wow.
Okay. And so here I was responsible for procuring new accounts for this web design firm. But what I was recognizing was I had been in the shoes of all these business owners that were coming in and asking me to help them. And I was recognizing, oh, I know what you're feeling. I know what your expectations are, but you don't know what to ask for. So, long story short, I got to the point where I was thinking, these guys, this web design firm, they need to run their business a little bit better and need to do this.
Mm.
And then it kind of hit me because it's been in the back of my mind. If you're so smart, Steve, why don't you just start your own company? And it's like, well, I'm arguing with myself. I'm going, yeah, but that's really scary to start my own business. These guys just need to run their business better.
Yeah.
But finally, I did step out and start my own company, but it was scary. It was really scary.
So you talked about something which lots of people, myself included, go through, right? Which is as you mature, as you, like you said, you meet newer people, you see the data coming in.
Mhm.
And I'm going to talk a little bit of tech speak right now,
Mhm.
but it's all about, so the artificial intelligence is really about, hey, how do you harness the data? The more data you have, the better your predictions. And here, as
Mhm.
humans, and you just mentioned that, right? You had all this data coming in, and you were able to make a prediction that, hey, with all of this information, I can make the lives of the entrepreneurs better. And you took
Mhm.
that leap. Many people ignore the data, number one. And and number two, second step is, okay, you got all this data, but to your point, I'm scared.
Mhm.
What if, right? And the what if has hit home like never before. Again, we can't avoid the pandemic, right? But lives have been upended. people have lost jobs, and it's a scary situation, and lots of people have to reinvent themselves. So what, again, going back to Teflon, you have to get hot on a number of things, and as you learn, you have to invest in. You just posted something on your website, which is be comfortable with the uncomfortable, right?
Mm.
Push the boundaries. Again, what sorts of, I mean, was there a community that was helping you? Were you leaning on other, I mean, how did you get that comfort to say, I'm going to try lots of things, I'm going to suck at them at first, but there's enough data that I think I can make a prediction, I can be good at it.
Yeah, I think all my experience of being in sales. Here's the thing about being in sales is what other position in the company that you work for puts their numbers up on a whiteboard and everybody knows if you suck or if you're good.
Yeah.
The accountants don't do it.
Marketing doesn't do it, engineering.
No,
Yeah.
nobody else does it.
Yeah.
But the sales guy's got to do that. He's got to put everything is transparent. And so I'd gotten comfortable with just my performance being out there. And I have a personality that's okay with maybe looking goofy or whatever. But but here's the thing, there's this voice inside of you that's trying to tell you you need to wait until it's the time is right. You need to
Mm.
wait until the time is right. And then and so you go through this internal struggle. What if the time's never right?
Yeah.
Or what if, how do I know when the time's right? But finally, I had some encouragement from another person,
Mhm.
and that really solidified that voice. I knew I was going to start my own business, but I didn't know what. And I had done these things like had a disaster restoration company. There was this period where I was going, I just want to make money, so we'll do disaster restoration, or we'll treat kitchen floor so they're not slippery. But
Mm.
I'd get into that, and you know what I hate? Treating floors and making them not slippery in the middle of the night, when the restaurants close. I
Yeah.
hated going into people's houses and ripping up their beautiful carpet and walls because of water. I just hated it. And so I think I got to the point where no, it's not I want to make money. It
Mm.
was like I need to find out where my unique value and skills can be real applicable, and then that can help that's fulfilling. And I think that gave me more conviction about stepping out and starting ROI online.
Wow, I mean, that word fulfilling, I think, is so powerful, because that gives you the energy. Like you and I were talking about over here. For me, doing this every Wednesday, at the end of it, I just come out at a high, right? Because I've met people, we're having this conversation, and it actually engages both of us, but also the audience.
Hmm.
So I want to come back to something that you and Alan. Hey, Alan, thanks for the Alan Langer. Thanks for the connection to Steve. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking.
Yeah, thanks,
Uh,
Alan.
so Alan and you did a live stream, and one of the most powerful things that is being talked about is social proof.
Mm,
And everybody wants to be known for something, right? And just like you said, hey, people came to the website because they knew what your company stood for. They
hmm.
come to ROI Online because they know what Steve stands for. So the question is, in this day and age, right, when they see people with, I don't know, 10,000 followers, and any post they do has 10 likes, and here I am, should I, shouldn't I? Um, and so the question is, everything starts with consistency, everything starts with incremental steps, right? But
Yeah,
that's not what you see out on social media. So again, how did the dialogue on social proof go? I mean, I looked at the number of comments and I was stunned,
yeah.
right? So clearly it has a very, very strong resonance with the audience. But talk a little bit about, how do you get from no followers, no guests, more importantly, no identified purpose, and then getting to, I found the purpose, and like you said, you've discovered what that why is, and now how do you build that social proof?
So I love that question because everybody wants to be Michael Jordan. Okay. Everybody sees him flying through the air and he's selling his shoes and Hanes underwear and all of that. But they don't realize that Mike Jordan was a nobody for a long, long time. He
Mm.
went home feeling just like a big loser, just like I did when I went home from basketball practice, but he did the reps, he did the reps, he did the work. And so I always like to say, don't be, everybody wants to be like Mike, they mean Michael Jordan, but I think you should be more like Mike Rowe.
Hmm.
Do the dirty jobs,
Yeah.
because in that process, doing the reps, showing up every day, whether you're whether it's where you're supposed to be for the rest of your life or not, showing up every day and doing the reps, that's where you're developing your unique perspectives, insights, experiences, and value. That's where, and it may, what you're doing right now may not be what you end up being an
Yeah.
expert at, but you need to do your reps, because that's where you get your depth. That's where you can relate with other people. People trust you because they can feel you understand them and that they're safe with you. And the only way they feel understood is if you can relate with them. And the only way you can relate with them is if you've been in the trenches doing what they've done before.
Yeah.
Okay. So social proof, when you ran into my book, first let's think about how you learned about me. You talked to Alan Langer, and he's the author of The Seven Secrets: How to Sell More by Selling Less. Well, I heard Alan Langer on a podcast with Donald Miller.
Hmm.
And I thought, I like this guy. I got his book. I read his book. Eventually, I reached out and talked to him. And so I'm an author too. So we connected. I had him on my podcast. I was on his podcast. But that wouldn't have happened if I didn't work for an agency, take my experiences from my sales job, start my own agency, finally get to the point where, I need to take this conversation I have every day with entrepreneurs and I need to put it into a book.
Hmm.
Okay. And because of all that past hustle, because I finally called myself out and said, stop saying you're going to write a book and start writing a book. And I did. It opened up all these other opportunities that wouldn't have come to me if I hadn't have done that. But the social proof is because Alan recommended me to you,
Yeah.
then your mind doesn't necessarily have to go look for someone. You don't have to do all this research because of that social proof.
Right.
He took away a lot of investigation. But you know what helped is that I had a book, that I had a podcast, that I had a website, that I had blogs. I had all these other assets that you could go and feel really good about having me as a guest. It it took away a lot of questions. But if I hadn't done that work in the past 7 or 8 years, I wouldn't have had that library of experiences and content to to have this conversation with you.
Very, very true. And exactly to your point. I mean, I do a little bit of research on each of my guests, and I went to your website. I was talking about you, right? I mean, the short takeaways from the podcast, and that leads me to the next question, right? Which is, you started this podcast. You've already hit 50, and you started this less than 6 months ago, right? But
Seven,
again,
yeah, yeah.
okay, 7 months. So again, that's going back to the Teflon analogy. That's another fire you've started on a brand new um, uh, uh, venture. And again, what gave you the courage? How did you overcome that discomfort of saying, okay, here I am, successful ROI online. Why am I kind of going down this podcasting thing? And talk about how that journey of talking to 50 plus guests has helped you now again open up new doors.
Yeah, so there's this point that you start a business, you get good customers, you have a good service, you get in good employees, and you start to run a good business. But there's a point where you potentially could plateau.
Mm,
Or or maybe if I let that define who I am, oh, you're Steve the business owner. But what if I ask myself, shouldn't you write a book? And I go, okay, well now my book is reaching out and changing people's perspectives on how they should look at what these one-on-one conversations were that were coming in. So I impacted a
yeah.
different level. But when the pandemic started, or when this situation started we found ourselves in, a lot of those opportunities shut down.
Mm,
So people that were teeing up to come on board, they said, I want to wait.
Yeah.
People that were hit real hard, they had to leave. And so we found ourselves like going, well, we would usually be working on other clients' accounts. And it's like, well, what can we control?
Yeah.
Well, we can control spinning up this podcast. And in the back of my mind, I'd been saying, I need to start my podcast. I need to start my podcast. And now it was like, now's the time to start my podcast. We can get to work on this and work really hard. And that was also about the time that people are going, hey, what do I do now? How can I start connecting and reaching out to people? It was a perfect time to start the podcast. Perfect time to get great guests that were in a similar situation.
Yeah.
And people were going, what value can I give to help my community? Well, what's a perfect platform to do that? On an interview and a podcast. So I was able to get great guests coming right out of the gate and start a really excellent podcast and do the reps. But again, you have to do it for a long time. So we just did, we've done, we're coming up on episode number 50 here. I think
Mhm.
this week is when number 50 drops. And so that's a big milestone, but it's something I have to show for what was going on in the pandemic. All those conversations, people are listening. They're getting value from all these awesome guests, and it's something that's fulfilling to me is is making these relationships, getting to talk about something geeky, and putting it out there. And people, you don't know who's
Yeah.
benefiting from it. So I hope I answered that question.
No, no, absolutely, and I couldn't agree more because a lot of these things that I'm also frequently on LinkedIn, but I did that long before, right? The writing and podcasting piece. But the thing that it always surprises me, even though it shouldn't, is lives getting impacted and people consuming without necessarily commenting or liking. There's this long tail that always stuns me. Somebody like 9 months later say, hey, that particular blog of yours was something that I read. And I said,
Hmm.
you never talked to me. I said, no, I'm just telling you now, right? On one-on-one setting. So that's and so last question, and this is one that I've asked every single one of my guests, and I get different answers, but it's a very close thing, especially now. And given the ideas that you have thrown out there in terms of being able to constantly pivot and experiment,
Hmm.
is how do you give yourself the time to cool down? Where is that moment of solace of going back and taking in and making adjustments, but also just disconnecting, right? And how do you make sure you don't burn out?
By I think I enjoy developing people. That's one of my ways of, when you do your job, I think part of one of my values is helping people on my team, helping my clients grow and change and develop from input or support or encouragement or something from me or a challenge. And so I think that's a way that I divert from me needing to do, and that where I can kind of invest
Mm.
and support or grow from that relationship in some way. And really feel that the relationships that I create along this is the most fulfilling aspect of this, yeah, of ROI online. Yeah.
No, like I said, everything that you say just resonates so strongly because I think the juices that you get by helping somebody else, I think automatically gives you that quantum of solace, right? Is that a James Bond film? Uh, Steve, again, super great chatting with you, and I highly encourage the viewers and listeners to go to your website. The podcasts are fantastic, but then the small takeaways that you have for each podcast is just, I
Mhm.
think it's a stunning because it gives you just a like the brief preview, and then he can hit play and listen to that again. Thank you for your time and good luck.
All right. Thanks so much for having me, Ashwin. You're a great host.
Thanks, Steve.